guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel। कैसे हो आप सब? तो आज की वीडियो में हम आपको एक कहानी सुनाएंगे, लेकिन उससे पहले मेरी वीडियो को लाइक, चैनल को सब्सक्राइब और बेल आइकन दबाना मत भूलना ताकि आप हमारी कोई भी वीडियो मिस ना कर सकें। कमेंट में बताना कहानी कैसी लगी और वीडियो को शेयर ज़रूर कर देना। सो लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड। तो हमारी कहानी का नाम है स्नो वाइट एंड सेवन ड्वार्फ्स। सो लेट्स गेट स्टार्टेड। Long ago, a beautiful baby girl called Snow White was born to a queen. A few months after her birth, the queen died, and the king married again. The new queen, Snow White's stepmother, was beautiful, but she was also proud and wicked. She wanted to be the most beautiful woman in the world. The queen had a magic mirror that always spoke the truth. Every day she would admire herself in the mirror and ask, "Mirror, mirror on the wall, who's the fairest of all?" The mirror would say,
"You, O Queen, are the fairest of all."
As Snow White grew up, she became prettier and prettier. One day, her stepmother asked the mirror and same question to her magic mirror. However, this time the mirror said,
O Queen, you are fair, but Snow White is fairer than you.
The queen was upset. Filled with jealousy, she planned to get Snow White killed. She entrusted this evil job to one of her servants and further told him,
"Bring back her heart to me. That's way I always know you have done your job."
The servant was grief-stricken, for he loved Snow White as everyone in the kingdom did, but he had to obey the queen's order. When he led Snow White deep inside the forest and took out his dagger, she pleaded with him to spare her life. She promised never to come anywhere near the palace too. The servant was filled with pity and left her alone. On the way back, he killed a deer and took it hard to the queen. She was thrilled, terrified, and alone in the forest. Snow White cried bitterly. She ate berries and nuts to satisfy her hunger. Exhausted, she almost gave up when she saw a small cottage with a tiny door, tiny windows, and a cute little chimney. She knocked at the door, but no one answered it, so she pushed it open. What she saw inside fascinated her. A table was laid out for seven, and there was seven of everything: plates, spoons, bowls, knives, and forks. Snow White took a little food from each of the seven plates and ate to her heart's content. Snow White then went upstairs and found seven neat beds. She lay down on one of them and fell into a deep sleep. The events of the day had been very disturbing. The cottage was home to seven dwarfs who worked in a mine during the day, digging diamonds. They were in for a big surprise when they returned home that evening. Some of their food has been eaten. She disguised herself as a peddler woman and set out into the forest. Soon she came to the dwarf cottage and spotted Snow White waving them goodbye. The disguised queen tapped on the cottage door and said,
Beautiful laces, buttons, and ribbons for sale.
When Snow White opened the door, the queen helped her to tie a lace on her dress, saying,
See how beautiful it looks.
And she fastened it so tightly that poor Snow White could not breathe and fell down unconscious. The queen hurried home feeling triumphant. The dwarf returned home and were shocked. They snipped the lace off Snow White's dress and she woke up immediately. After they heard about the peddler woman, they said,
Never open the door to strangers when you are alone.
That evening, when the mirror again told the queen, that Snow White was fairer than her. She realized that her plan had failed, so this time she carried a basket of juicy apples in which she kept one poisoned fruit. Disguised as a peasant woman, she reached the dwarf's cottage. Snow White heard her and said,
I don't need any apples.
she refused to open the door. The queen then said,
I'll give you an apple as a reward for being a good girl.
Snow White opened the door very slightly to take the apple. The moment she bit into it, she fell down. The queen was thrilled when the mirror told her that evening that she was indeed the fairest. The worried dwarf came home to find Snow White lying lifeless. Much as they tried, they could not revive her, weeping inconsolably. They laid her in a glass topped coffin as they wanted people to admire her beauty. They placed the coffin on a grassy hill and took turns to guard her. A few days later, a prince was passing by and unexpectedly he fell in love with Snow White's beauty. He wanted to take the coffin to his castle. The dwarf did not agree, but they allowed him to kiss her. Just as the prince kissed her, Snow White moved her head and out fell the piece of apple from her mouth. She started back to life slowly and instantly fell in love with the handsome prince. Back in the palace, the queen was stunned to hear that Snow White was fairer than her. Meanwhile, the king knew about her evil attempts to kill Snow White. He banished her from the kingdom and no one ever saw or heard of her and her mirror. The dwarf reluctantly bade Snow White goodbye. The prince took her to his castle where they got married and lived happily ever after. थैंक यू। मैं आशा करती हूँ आपको ये हमारी आज की कहानी अच्छी लगी होगी। तो वीडियो को सब्सक्राइब, लाइक, शेयर और हाँ कमेंट करना मत भूलना। तो अब हम मिलेंगे आपको अपनी अगली वीडियो में। तब तक के लिए बाय बाय।